We have 5 adjudicators, 4 panels. Firstly, on my left is Youngjae from Hanyang, and next is Youngjae from Dae, and we have Mr. Air Force here from Skeda, and we have Taeyeong from Hanyang. Without any further ado, I'd like to call the Prime Minister to open the stage.
I don't believe in a perfect world, but I do believe that certain things stand out that is worth respecting. And one of the most important political systems that we have in current contemporary history is what we call democracy. And democracy represents the will of the people. We believe that democracy is a political system that can be very similar to other political systems. But nonetheless, democracy possesses a unique trait to which we think are certain values that are important. In other words, we believe that communism also strives for equality, but we also think that democracy in this sense has certain values that are worth saying that it is distinct. And we will prove to you how the internet facilitates these values or facilitates the function of democracy within this respect. So what are we going to do? I, as the first speaker, will talk about the general framework of how it generally does, and indeed, in particular, facilitates certain values within democracy, how it makes it stronger. Youngjae will come up and tell you how it empowers the powerless, how the internet is an incredible force of providing them with hope and dialogue in this respect. So firstly, what is democracy? As I said, it's a political system, but that political system is based on the value that everyone should be represented. That you have a direct influence in politics, and those people are responsive to you. We think this is very important, but we can elaborate this in 3 particular ways. The first is, in order for representation to actually take place within democracy, freedom of expression is very important. But secondly, we also say that there necessarily needs to be multilateral and inter-exchangeable dialogue between individuals, organizations, people, and the government through this interaction responds. Thirdly, we also think that equality is also an essential aspect in this way. But equality in the sense that everyone has a stake within the system, within society, that everyone's views and everyone's opinions should be reflected in an equal level. But we think that democracy is damaged and is made impossible when these 3 things are not protected. We think when freedom of expression is oppressed, democracy cannot be empowered. We think when there is no dialogue between people and government, this cannot happen. We also believe that democracy, the true meaning of democracy, cannot be upheld when that equality becomes disproportionate equality in that sense. So in this sense, let's begin. We think that, so how does the internet facilitate freedom of expression in this regard? That's my first point. We think firstly, it provides a platform for expression, that individuals can express their views on a certain platform that is very different from when the internet didn't exist. What do we mean? When we say democracy is important and we have freedom of expression, in the past we usually refer to the freedom of the media. The freedom of media was an alternative discourse to representing people's views. But if you think about it, the media isn't necessarily people's expressions. It also doesn't provide a way of information. People's views aren't widely viewed, which is why the internet is so much unique in this way. Everyone who has a computer can go to a simple homepage, go to Naver, go to Twitter, go to Facebook, and express their opinions. They can go to other websites and see what other people have to say. In this sense, it is very distinct from what we have from the media, and it facilitates freedom of expression in this way. And the internet provides an easy access in this respect. But furthermore, we also say that it produces more discourse and more dialogue than in the past. Why is that? Because freedom of expression is much more easier in this respect, that all you need to use is a computer and do this, right? People can not only access other people's opinions, but you also rebut it, like we're doing right now. You can also see like what other information is available in that respect. We think that in this sense, it's increasingly important. No, thank you. We also say, so in this respect, how does it facilitate interaction between other people? And how does it facilitate interaction between government and citizens? We tell you that a platform provided within this respect, the internet, is something that everyone can access to. Everyone. Everyone can access to it. All you need is a computer in that respect. But furthermore, we also say it actually facilitates because people mostly put on websites, government websites, organizations' website, individual website, my Facebook that nobody comes to. So basically, it provides a lot more information and interaction in this respect. We think that internet does that. When we didn't have the internet, how could you actually know about organizations? How did you know about like government policies? The newspaper. Could you comment on it? Yes, you need to like protest, right? But the internet provides a place where you can do it indirectly, and the government can see it, other organizations can see it, and that's why it's so important. Furthermore, we also say that it's responsive, especially because politicians can also see. You see many days that politicians have websites. You also see government organizations that have websites, and it's important to improve democracy or political systems when you have, by reflecting people's opinions. The internet provides that platform because in the past you either had to write a letter or protest.
Do you think that on the internet, majority opinion is expressed once you express that opinion, or it is already formed on the internet itself?
We don't think that's much of a big issue. It's like the chicken and the egg, right? We think freedom of expression is facilitated by having the internet, but what we question is, without having the internet, that's not available. Or your channel or avenue of expression is significantly inhibited in this respect. How does it actually enhance equality, or value of equality within a democracy? We think that equality of expression is also increasingly important. What do we mean by that? What do we mean by that? We think that democracy is not perfect, but it's becoming more imperfect, and it can be more imperfect and problematic when the media controls the way you think. It's problematic when people who have more money have the ability to influence politicians through lobbying, through making campaigns, and through providing more donation. But what this does is, it provides a platform for expression. It provides a platform for expression to which politicians couldn't adhere in the past. It provides much more organized expression, where people gather together who have similar beliefs and also express their views. It also invites challenges and invites cooperation to challenge government policies in this respect, and also make the government reveal their hypocrisies. We think in this sense it provides an invaluable channel of expression to people who don't have power, people who don't have money in that respect, which is why the government is able and should be much more responsive to those people as well. But finally, we also say, although this is not yet developed, I believe it will be soon. We call it Chandatsujo, right? We also believe that it could also facilitate direct democracy in this sense. And we think that the internet in this sense is generally unique, to which we can say that it empowers democracy, these values. Thank you.
The speakers go for 7 minutes and 37
Okay, I thank the Prime Minister for his speech. I'd like to now call Leader of Opposition to open the
Mr. Chair, let's get this debate into context. This is a simple adjudication about whether the internet actually produces better harms or better benefits towards the direct democracy or the democracy system that we already have in the current status quo. Stance from side opposition is very simple. We believe that the internet actually does produce more harms than benefits on the internet scale towards the democracy that we support in today's society. I have several reasons to actually support this fundamental idea. First off, we're going to characterize the overall debate on what democracy is, and we're going to characterize the internet in a way that actually shows you the specific harms of how it produces in democracy. And our second argument is going to tell you about how this specific entity does not empower the fundamental ideas of democracy itself. Our second speaker, Mingeun, is going to comment to you and why emotional democracy is a fundamental harm that comes from the internet itself and why that is bad for the overall society. Before I go into these arguments, several points of rebuttal. First of all, Jaeyong comes here and talks about his rhetoric, his very passionate rhetoric about how he supports democracy and how he supports the fundamental three ideas of freedom of expression, multilateral dialogue, and equality. Let's rebut one point one by one. First, on regarding freedom of expression, we cannot deny for the fact that freedom of expression already exists in the internet. We're going to concede that freedom of expression is already existent in the internet itself. But first of all, we don't necessarily believe that unilaterally giving the much quantity of information is always the best quality of information in an overall democracy. You talk about multilateral dialogue, you talk about how the overall the quantity of democracy is going to increase, but our contention on side opposition is that just because you have more dialogue, just because you have more intercourse within the overall society and talking about the quantity of information, it does not necessarily bring the good quality of information that we want to impose on the opinions of the values that individual people already have. No, thank you, ma'am. So we're going to explain further about why that quality of information is not necessarily that good. Going on to the third idea about equality, they come here and say and characterize the situation as if media controls, like if we didn't have the internet, then the media is going to control the overall situation and they're going to enforce opinions upon you. First of all, you have a burden of proof to actually prove to you why the media is actually going to do this and why there isn't intercourse to begin with and why the internet is the only means to actually do it. But second of all, we challenge the idea because the moment that you actually go into the internet and express minority opinions is the moment where the internet actually challenges that opinion, but there's less incentive for minority opinions to actually express their idea on the internet, and I'm going to explain to you further in my overall speech. Mr. Speaker, this is a clear debate about why the internet actually produces more harms than benefits. Let's go into the overall characterization of what democracy actually is. No, thank you, sir. First of all, let's analyze what democracy is. Yes, we do believe that it is an idea about freedom of expression. We do agree upon the idea that it is about bringing more equality in the overall society. The fundamental premise that you have to draw within here is you have to listen to everyone's voice, including the minority's voice, and based upon that opinion, you create policies, you create politicians, and you create an overall democracy that represents everyone in today's society. That is the overall characterization that we want to draw on democracy. Before I go into the minority opinions, let's characterize what is the internet. The internet is a very, very delicate stakeholder in today's debate. First of all, there's a lot of flow of information. We believe that a lot of the information within the internet is actually not censored on the premise of freedom of expression. We believe that there's a lot of ideas within this overall idea, and it's accessible to everyone. We agree with the kind of benefits that come from that idea, but we believe that there's going to be far more harms than benefits. We believe that that's fundamentally bad for democracy. We're listening to the minority opinions. Why is that? Let's go to my second argument about why it does not empower the overall opinions of minorities itself. Because first of all, we believe that the characteristics of internet is that people already posted specific ideas and specific opinions upon the internet itself. So when an individual minority actually goes onto the internet, that is the moment where they already see the majority opinion. That is the point where they actually see for a fact that their minority opinion is really a minority opinion. We draw that distinction between elections because fundamentally we believe that a fundamental reason why election is so good is because you actually go and take a vote, and based upon those votes, the majority opinion is already created. But the distinction that we want to create here on the internet is that people actually go onto the internet, and based upon that majority opinion, they also create that as an educated decision. They also create their opinions based upon that majority opinion. We believe that fundamentally that's problematic because people don't necessarily can actually express their opinion. We believe that it is far more harder for the internet to actually express and allow minority opinions to come in. But before I go on, yes, sir.
Mr. Speaker, the existence of this minority opinion is important, first of all, because it challenges the majority. But are you saying that you automatically okay this? It creates more debate and discussion. That's what we want.
Okay, first of all, we've already told you for a fundamental fact that the moment, I'm going to explain further, but the moment where minority opinions actually get dissed into society is the moment where they actually refer to personal thoughts, is the moment where they actually create their own groups within themselves, because obviously this is society is going to diss them. I'm going to further explain within my own arguments. So the fundamental premise that we want to draw here is that it is hard for minority opinions to actually come into the overall idea. Why is that? There are two main reasons. The first of all, the moment that a minority opinion actually comes into society, it either gets buried or it either gets dissed. The fundamental reason why it's either get buried or dissed is the fundamental reason is because it actually goes against the majority opinion already created in the internet itself. Therefore, people don't have a fundamental incentive to actually post their minority opinions upon the internet itself. But second of all, we strongly believe on the idea that the majority parties also have a lot of capital, they also have a lot of incentive, and also a lot of influence within the internet itself. So therefore, majority parties already have a big incentive to actually like post a lot of like advertisements upon the internet. They actually influence upon the opinion based upon their own capital. But second of all, they also hire a lot of commenters within the overall society because they actually can post them. These commenters, these like part-time commenters, actually post their specific opinions. They actually go for the down 24/7. They continue to post these specific comments, and it actually creates a majority opinion within itself. No, thank you, ma'am. Therefore, the fundamental reason why this is bad for an overall democracy is because there are no checks and balances. The fundamental reason behind this is because the reason why there is no checks and balances, because when people actually look into an internet opinion, they cannot distinguish about whether if it's like a normal person's opinion or whether if it was actually paid within that society or paid by the political party within themselves. But the second reason why it is harmful is because there is a specific manipulation of the overall media. When a person actually sees this specific opinion and actually knows for a fact that the majority party is either 새누리당 or actually the Democratic Party, that is the moment where they actually perceive for a fact, and this is the majority party, and you actually have to follow that specific majority party, and therefore fundamentally these individual minority parties cannot actually comment upon those opinions. They cannot actually perceive their overall rule, and we believe that on that fundamental basis, the majority party continuously based upon their own capital, based upon their own ideas, continuously fuels this specific democracy, and therefore minority opinions automatically get dissed or automatically get buried, and we believe that that's fundamentally harmful in the internet sphere and overall democracy. Mr. Speaker, I clearly characterize what the internet is and how the internet actually progresses this specific idea into the overall society, and why that specific characterization actually creates a harder time for minority opinions to come about and express their own opinions. And for that fundamental reason, I'm supremely proud to oppose.
The speaker spoke for 7 minutes and 15 seconds.
Can you guys lower your voices a little bit? I thank the leader of opposition. I'd like to now call the Deputy Prime Minister to
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Speaker, now under the motion that this House believes that the internet empowers democracy, Mr. Speaker, we believe clearly from the government that internet is the way to provide the relative most people to the avenue of freedom of expression. We believe that the internet is different from the media, clearly. That it's a way of it's under the theory of prosumer. People go to these places, produce their ideas, and consume the ideas of others. And we value this discourse and discussion among the people. We believe that Jaeyong already told you that it's different from the newspapers because you have to write letters and you don't even know if you're going to be represented. But when in the internet, you can actually see the ideas of other people and you can actually be represented on your choice. And we believe this is the benefits of the internet. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to today talk about why we need to empower the powerless in combating against repressive regimes and the protection of the freedoms and the rights of these peoples who are repressed. But before I do that, let's take a look at what the leader of opposition brought us today. So first of all, he said that, well, if you express minority ideas on the internet, you're going to be dissed, so you shouldn't do it. Mr. Speaker, this is the problem. We ask you today, if you express a minority opinion, should we then, first of all, just automatically, no, thank you, sir. Should we automatically okay to it? No, we as a majority, not just the majority, but people should actually look at that minority opinion and see the good and bad of it, and then debate it and see if that minority opinion is actually worth following. And we believe that this minority opinion on this other side challenges the majority and tells you, you guys are not 100%. We also have these other ideas. This is is where debate and discourse increases. The idea of saying that, well, your minority opinion is going to be dissed, so this is bad at the internet, this has no relevancy. Second of all, we talk about today, he talks about some small exceptions, some commentators being hired to support the government. We see both sides of the opinion being represented on Twitter and Facebook and internet. If what they say is true, you will not see any kind of diss against Mingeun Pak or Seung-Hwan on Twitter. We already have this. Second of all, internet, different. It's extensive. It's a global opening to all parties. It's a worldwide web. What we see is that they say, well, the government is going to manipulate people on the capitalistic ideas. They're saying that the government is going to use its funds, use its revenue by every single person and say, go on the internet and write something supporting us. This has no idea in today's debate. What they're saying is that we believe that this is a minority within our society. First of all, it's illegal. No, thank you, sir. It's illegal for the government to actually pursue some kinds of ideas like this. And second of all, it doesn't happen when the government doesn't use all its funds to actually buy off people to write things supporting them. And we already have this discourse within the internet actually going against the government and actually saying things about Mingeun Pak. So, with my rebuttals out of the way, let me look at my argument today. I'm going to talk about why do we need to empower the powerless, combat against repressive regimes, and protect the freedoms and rights of the people, and how the internet actually does this. Now, first of all, Mr. Speaker, we see the internet as an effective tool for expressing dissent against a repressive regime when there's no other avenue available. To actually support this idea, I bring you the example of Tunisia. Now, Mr. Speaker, when we saw the Tunisian revolution, it was not because the people just said we should get together, but it was the idea because we saw the government and a police officer taking the job away of an individual peddler because the police officer was bored. And when this person actually took to the streets and burned himself and showed his idea on YouTube, this was actually when the people could actually see that what the government was doing. They saw the clear harms, and they also saw that this was exactly the tool that they needed to express the dissent against the government. It was giving information to the mass of the people, the prevailing effect on these people to actually see the clear harms of their own government and see the repression that was occurring. But second of all, Mr. Speaker, we see that the internet is an organizing tool. It's the only organizing tool because of the fact that it has the prevailing effects on the people. Now, it tells the vast majority of people to fight against the repression and come together. As we saw on Twitter and Facebook with Tunisia, same with Libya. We saw people going on the internet and telling you that we have to fight against the repressive regime that actually has trouble, the repressive regime that goes against the people, that harms the people, that hurts you just because it can, just because it wants to. When the people actually came together onto the internet to fight this repressive regime, this is what we saw as a clear benefit of the internet actually providing real democracy amongst these people. This is what we saw with the organizing tool. There was no other way for these people to organize. They used the internet and they came together and they successively brought down problematic governments. No, thank you, sir. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, we believe that the internet provides enlightenment to the people. It provides people with the information that they need to know. It's the true value of democracy about liberal ideas and the avenue of information to other people. Mr. Speaker, look at the example of North Korea. The government consistently stops you from seeing anything on the internet. You cannot have any information. And this is why this repressive regime has been able to keep itself for 3 different regimes. They are actually blocking off information to the people. If they have access, these people have access to the information, they can be enlightened and see what their government is and see the see true values of democracy, and see what the change that they can fight for. Not providing them with this actually blocks them from the democracy, and this is how the North Korean government has succeeded so far, by actually blocking people off from any kinds of information. I mean, Mr. Speaker, when you want change, when you want democracy, when you want the change for democracy, you have to have an avenue for people to have information and be enlightened. Finally, Mr. Speaker, this idea that internet provides information to outside nations. It provides information to people within the United States, people in Korea about what happens in Libya, what happens in Tunisia, Mr. Speaker. It raises awareness, it creates support, and it creates international pressure against these repressive regimes. And why is this international pressure so important? It's important on the basis that you create an upholding of international democratic values, about upholding freedom, about protecting the rights of these individuals who were repressed. You actually have people knowing about these events, knowing the clear harms, knowing the clear dangers, that they have to support these people, support going against oppressive regimes, uphold their own ideas of democracy. And before I proceed, any POI, sir? Yes, sir.
You talked about how no longer people in specific Twitter don't actually go against email policies, or in other sites actually they do actually support the idea of these policies themselves. That is the moment where they actually create a disparity between the sites, and they only talk about discussions between the people that they actually support.
Mr. Speaker, we had a very long POI that explained absolutely nothing. Because first of all, from government we tell you that on on Twitter, there's the existence of both ideas. You can go against Myeongbak, you can go with Myeongbak. All they're saying is that the government is manipulating people with all the money that they spend of having only people that support Myeongbak. That's not true in the status quo. It's not going to be in the future. So that's why we have this idea of the internet benefiting. So today, Mr. Speaker, from government side, we have a clear stance that this is the most avenue where the people can go and they can produce their ideas and consume the ideas of others. It provides discourse and debate. And my argument today about the repressive regimes, are we going to let these people, with people like Gaddafi, people like Gaddafi of Tunisia, and people like Kim Jong-un in North Korea, are you going to let them suffer? No. Now, if you don't want them to suffer, what do you have to do? You have to allow them to express dissent against the government, like they did in Tunisia. You have to have an organizing tool, like they had in Libya and Tunisia. You have to have enlightenment, which isn't happening in North Korea, which is why they don't have democracy. And finally, you need to provide information to the international society to actually pressure these repressive regimes, uphold values of democracy, liberal values that can help the international society, bring security to the international society after providing democracy for these people. So, Mr. Speaker, today, it's not an idea of who won this debate. It's an idea of how big the margin was. Because opposition did nothing today. They provided you with false ideas. They provided you with ideas that don't even stand in our society. And they tried to actually engage, but they didn't even make any delineations or demarcations. We believe government clearly takes this debate home by a huge margin. Proud to vote.
Like your t-shirt.
근데 뒷면 봤어?
Okay, we'd like to hear from the next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I move on, let me clarify things. First of all, what I want to emphasize is that in this debate, we want to talk about democracy being maintained. It's not about bringing new systems into society. It's empowering democracy itself. We're talking about where we have a system of democracy. It's about how, in the long term, how can you have a better democracy in the system itself. It's not it's not mainly about bringing new systems into society. However, although we concede even though we concede that it could be about having no regimes, however, we believe there's a serious problem in the long term. Because first of all, although they have democratic system in themselves, we believe that because of the sole characteristic itself of the internet, we believe there could be a more public government and more manipulation in public opinion. So Prime Minister explained on the characteristics of the internet. So we believe there could be more long-term harms, which will be elaborated more in my rebuttals and arguments. Now I would like to move on to my own rebuttals and then go on to my rebuttals. Arguments, sorry. So, first of all, clarification. First of all, they said that they made fun of the idea that there are imbalance in ideas and there are only majority problems existing in society. However, I guess they're not really acknowledging about the current society in Korea. There are majority parties actually using commenters in the status quo to hire them and manipulate the majority view. Why is it so effective? As my Prime Minister explained to you, it is the majority view existing in the internet environment itself. But secondly, it's about getting more attention to the majority view. Why? Because in the internet, there are numerous of information and a lot of information. So when the cases of seeing information, which of the information do people get interested? It's the information which has the most impact, has the most number of opinions in the internet itself. So when there's more numbers of opinions of the majorities, when the majorities have the more proportion of the information in the internet itself, you see inevitably people get more skewed because of the first of all imbalance of information and because they see more comments. When it comes to making information and making decisions, people need balanced information. However, because of this kind of manipulation acts of the majority party, and because there are more proportionate opinions about these majority parties, we see those kind of distortions and imbalance. My second point is thank you. Okay. First of all, as I explained, after that I explained about why it's so unequal. Although people can post their ideas, we concede to the fact that they have the freedom to post ideas in the internet. However, as I clearly explained, the attention, the amount of attention, and the way that they give on each opinion is different. As I say, although an individual posts his idea against mad cow disease or against witch hunting on Gaetongyeong or other incidents, they get scrutinized by the majority opinion. Why? Because first of all, the reason is that when you see the mechanism of how the opinions in the internet works, first it's anonymous. because it's anonymous, when it comes to debating, they do not have like sole reason why they should be like considering about the person's opinion itself. It's more about emotion and about their instinct, how they feel about the opinion in the first impression. So because of that, although people see different opinions, it's more likely to them to scrutinize because it's different from themselves. Because it's anonymous. They don't care about like people thinking about like, who they posted or not. Because they're so concealed and so anonymous and so open to the comments, really those kind of debates, although happens, first of all, it can end up in scrutinizing the minority opinions, and secondly, really it's marginalizing those opinions out of the majority opinions in the society. It brings wrong debates. Now, before I move on to my arguments, anyone?
I do know you're highlighting a very tiny aspect of the internet. Prove to us citizens aren't rational enough to know what is right or wrong in this respect.
Okay. Being rational, okay? The only point coming from this side is that people are rational enough to tell whether this is right or wrong. However, when they see information, can you guarantee everybody has to check and balance and information that is needed to decide whether this information is really valid or not? This is the case one. And secondly, when they see an opinion, the distinct characteristic of the internet is that they have the opinion of people. The problem is that when they see a newspaper, they can see that this information is from an entity called like newspaper publishing companies, so they have critical ideas about that. However, when they see an opinion, it's really hard for them to tell whether this is a really valid information because first of all, as I said, anonymity. They do not know the source of the information, different from the newspaper, which have like editorials and people like concealing who they are. So they do not know the validity of the information. It's very hard for them to tell. So, and secondly, although they have this kind of like information in those things, it's very hard to tell whether it's a real information or like false information. So that is my answer. Like third point of rebuttal, like no thank you. Okay, like about like organized about being organized. They talk about like there are more organized opinions in the like internet environment. However, that is not true. Like it's more about like linked to my argument. Like my argument is about actually having outrage opinions in society and why is it so bad. What we call in like Korean Nembi Hyunsang. Why is it so detrimental to society? Let's say they get organized very quickly. In the internet, it's so accessible and so easy for them to make opinions and express. The process of having public opinions like happens very fast without any enough examination or like validation of the arguments. So when it comes to incidents about like the mad cow disease and other incidents which have outraged the public opinion, the problem is that we're finally having different ideas. However, when we see the purpose of the democracy, the purpose of democracy is also having like reducing the social cost and making the right decisions through trial and error. So on the basis of this, we want to decrease the trial and errors and have less like wasteful like debates. So we want more rational ideas and more healthy debates. However, the problem with internet is that you have a direct like interaction with them. Direct interaction. It means that when you see an issue, you directly like express your opinion in like much more emotional way. Why? Because like when you see it differently from other medias, when you see a certain information, there's time and more like time for reaction to think about whether your like reaction is whether it's really rational or not. However, when you see a comment instantly, you post your opinion, especially when we have like smartphone SNSs, we like post our arguments like before like thinking about whether this is really like valid or not. The problem is that because there's so much like invalid ideas in society, these kind of outrageous society increases social cost because it takes more time for them to like persuade them whether it's right or wrong. In the sense of mad cow disease, there were like influx of information about how mad cow disease is like making people crazy and die. However, like after all, it didn't like turn out to be the real like detrimental factor. It was like really controversial, but because of the internet had so much like emphasis on the majority ideas only, like which opposed to the mad cow disease, it ended up having an outrageous protest, which ended up nothing. My second point of argument is about like victims being innocent, victims being like harmed. Like the whole point of democracy is also about like regarding individual human rights and their like, right to be protected. However, in the case of the 대통령 and 패륜녀, although I'm not saying that they did something right. However, when it comes to like forming the reaction, they form the reaction in a much radical way and much more fiercely. So we say that we're overly burdening these people as demonizing them out of society. That is not the purpose of democracy. We are trying to respect individuals and give them hope. And lastly, in our side, we have like clearly taken this debate like to this side because we have provided what democracy is and why is it distorting it, and these guys are not doing the job. Thank you.
The speaker spoke for 7 minutes and 44 seconds.
Okay, we'd like to hear from Governor Miller.
Start? Ladies and gentlemen, debate one-on-one, especially for CUDS, who knows how to make cases on the government side, you need to engage, especially when the second half of our debate is talking about new democracies and repressive regimes. That is absolutely wrong. But even if, I'll go on to the cases that they did deal with. Now, the first contention is whether quantity actually leads to quality. Quantity of expressions on the internet, which can be achieved, especially and only on the internet, because it is easily accessible and it is in a massive scale, different to existing media avenues, we believe yes. We believe that the increase of quantity can lead to quality because the freedom of expressions, knowing that other opinions exist, debating about it on a multilateral level, not just telling someone one-sided, which was in the case of newspapers, but now we can actually write comments, write 댓글 on Chosunilbo or things like that. We believe that once you do hear rebuttals like we're hearing right now, it can lead to new ideas. Oh, I guess maybe you could have thought that, and that new progress ideas does make sense, that quantity does lead to quality. Now, the opposition side said, no, that doesn't happen. In the case of quantity, they talked about how Ketongno happened, that the majority opinion on the internet criticized Ketongno, and that was bad because it against her human rights. What we see today is another new discussion in browsing that whether what that action was rather right or wrong, whether we should treat an individual like that, whether we should take a picture of someone and just upload it like that, whether that is respecting human rights or wrong, a new discourse has started, and we believe that this new discourse is another aspect of internet. Another thing about mad cow disease, again, that happened in 2008 or whatever, but now in 2012, we see a new discourse talking about whether mad cow disease was supposed to be portrayed like that. We see that this new discussion leading to penis control being legitimately determined in the judicial system. That we believe that because of this progress, yes, quantity does lead to quality. No. Now let's look at the second contention, which is in the case of existing democracies and new democracies. In the case of existing democracy, you need to really prove to us the unique harms of the internet. I'll do that for you, and I'll compare which are really unique harms or harms that already exist without the internet, and I'll portray to you the unique benefits